right, in this last section of chapter 10, we are going to be covering emotion. So we're going to be talking about the basic biology of emotions, theory of emotion, and then how we express and interpret emotions. Before we really get into this section, I want you guys to check out these videos of what are called hakas. This is a New Zealand tradition that has been going on in the Maori native, tribe of New Zealand for centuries. It's now used as a sign of respect. It's used as like a ceremonial ritual to start major events, and in particular, it's used in before a rugby match. So you can see these guys here in this image. They're doing these crazy stances and making big faces and kind of putting their arms up. And this is like a display of dominance and strength, and they're essentially trying to intimidate their opponent. So I want you guys to watch the videos that I have on the playlist, and in particular, pay attention to their facial expressions and what they're trying to convey during the haka. I have one about the All Blacks rugby team that you see here in the picture. I have one of the women's team, and then I have a wedding haka and a little baby doing a haka dance because it's just the cutest thing ever. So check those out, and you'll learn a little bit about this culture and this tradition, and I think it's a really special thing. So as we get started, we have some key terms. Emotion. This is a state characterized by physiological arousal, so changes in your level of attention and focus and energy. It involves changes in our facial expression, our gestures of our entire body, posture, and our internal subjective feelings with a question mark, because we can have a different feeling inside than what we display on the outside. And these expressions may not always match what's happening internally. And it's very hard to judge and to define these internal subjective feelings. We do know that emotions are linked to adaptive behaviors, and adaptive behaviors are any actions that aid in our attempts to survive and adapt to changing conditions. So having different emotions helps people learn to live in groups, cooperate, and defend each other. If someone walks up to you and they're smiling, you can assume that they're friendly and they're not going to be a threat. But if they walk up to you with this really angry facial expression like you see in the haka, you're going to be intimidated and you're going to probably leave them alone or be ready to battle. And so these adaptive behaviors helps us understand the intent of another person. It also helps us understand, if someone's upset or sad or fearful, to go and comfort them or to provide some sort of support. Emotions, with emotions, we do see physiological changes. We see alterations in heart rate. If you're angry or fearful, your heart rate is faster. We see changes in blood pressure, perspiration, and other involuntary responses. We see changes in adrenaline and noradrenaline from your adrenal glands above your kidneys. And we're going to talk about kind of how those get read later on by what we know as a polygraph test. And we'll talk about that later on. Emotional expressions are outward signs that an emotion is current. So that's what we actually see. So for an example here on the top is a chimpanzee, and you see the lower lip pulled down. You see their teeth showing, and like the lips are pulled back. This is not a smile. This is not a happy chimpanzee. This is a fearful chimpanzee. Chimps will pull their teeth back in like a grimace when they're afraid. And we think of that as a smile, but if you look at this golfer here in the bottom, she's showing the same facial expression. She just made a bad putt. And we do that if you see someone get like a bone broken on TV or something like fearful happens, we cringe and we kind of pull our teeth back and we maybe make that like sucking in sound. It's the same thing. We as humans smile also by showing our teeth, but that involves different muscles and a different movement of our actual mouth. And we'll talk about smiles and kind of the complexity of smiles in a little bit. We also have emotional feelings. These are the internal, private, subjective experiences that you have of an emotion. And these, again, are happening inside. They're inside your mind. And they can oftentimes be hard to identify. We learn as little kids like, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm fearful. We learn these basics, but there's a lot of more subtle emotional feelings that are harder for us to pinpoint. Anticipation, anxiety, grief, they're harder to pinpoint because they're mixes of these more basic emotions into much more complexity. And we have just basic emotions that we see even from infancy, and we even see these in other animals as well. Emotions such as fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, anticipation, joy, and acceptance. These are what we consider to be the basic emotions. And again, even other animals will show these. Babies and young children show these emotions. We talked about that back in chapter 3. But these basic emotions then add up and they mix and combine to make other emotions. And that's what we see here. This is Plutchnik's Wheel of Emotions, and you can see all the major emotions around the wheel here in the major sections. We have like joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, anticipation, and then they combine together. So trust and joy becomes love, and fear and trust becomes submission. Over here we have joy and anticipation. This is optimism. And then if we look at how strong these things are, so joy, when it's mild, becomes serenity. I'm sorry if this is really hard to see. It's not a great picture. Joy with intensity is ecstasy. So trust with intensity is admiration, it looks like. And then trust, it looks like acceptance. It's hard to see. But I have another kind of vision or image of it here. So if we go back to trust, we have acceptance and admiration, ecstasy and serenity, anticipation, interest, and vigilance. So these are like the really strong versions of the basic emotions. These are the basic emotions. And then here are the more milder forms of it with what they kind of add up to. And I really like these graphs. I think it makes it easier to understand, and it helps me pinpoint what you're feeling right now. So maybe with, I'm recording this right now during the coronavirus pandemic, self-quarantining. So we might have some anticipation, but kind of maybe veering more towards vigilance. And then maybe we're having some sadness relating to, end of the year events being canceled. I wouldn't maybe say it's maybe grief, but maybe somewhere between sadness and pensiveness, some fear, apprehension happening. And it's interesting to see these things kind of add up with one another as well. So again, our basic emotions we just covered, they're really fast and automatic. They're involuntary. We don't control how and when we express them. We have something happen to us and immediately we're feeling this psychologically in our minds. They do develop early. They're universal among humans, and we do share a lot of them with other animals, especially mammals. So if we go back here, my dogs definitely feel anticipation when they hear the garage door open and we come back. They feel joy. They have trust in me. They may feel fearful if someone comes to the door that they don't know. Surprise. Sadness, it's a harder one to kind of pinpoint, but maybe, we're leaving. They're definitely feeling a little sadness. Disgust, I don't know if dogs are ever disgusted by much of, something gross. Definitely anger, someone knocking on the door, for sure. Anticipation, again, hearing that garage door open and they're just ready to see us. So we do see a lot of other animals sharing those emotional states with us. The word mood is a lower intensity, long-lasting emotional state, and this influences our day-to-day behavior. So some people kind of lean a little bit more to a happy mood. Some people lean to a more negative or upset, sadness kind of mood. But people who have happy moods, and again, this can change from time to time, have more adaptable behaviors. They make better decisions, they're more creative, and they're typically more peaceful in their decision-making process, and they're more peaceful kind of overall in the way that they view the world. So having a good mood can be important to, or trying to put yourself in a good mood if you're trying to make an important decision might be valuable because you might be able to make a better decision or be more creative. So if you're working on a project to have a good mood, this may be some good music or doing something fun beforehand. We've talked a little bit about where emotions come from, but our amygdala is the primary region. Again, this is like that little cherry on the edge of the hippocampus here. This is the amygdala that regulates emotions. That's where we store emotions. Insula is, again, right kind of alongside this. Cingulate cortex, basal ganglia, they play a small role, especially when it relates to fear. And then we have your cerebral cortex. Overall, it's kind of how you're interpreting events and taking in sensory information from the rest of the world. Our autonomic nervous system, if we go way back again to chapter 2, is a system of nerves that connects our brains with our internal organs and glands. So the autonomic nervous system is what can kind of turn on in times of fear or that fight or flight response. So we see muscle tension, you get that pounding heart, a dry mouth, butterflies in your stomach, trembling. All this can be done in response to emotions. And it doesn't have to be like a physical fear of being injured. It could be a social fear, fear of embarrassment. Imagine like having to do a presentation in front of class and those nerves that you might feel. And you're probably going to feel some of this. You're going to feel a pounding heart, dry mouth, butterflies in your stomach. Those are all emotional responses to some sort of perceived fear. So that fight or flight response is the sympathetic branch of our autonomic nervous system. Remember, we have the sympathetic branch that turns on that fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic branch quiets the body afterwards and helps conserve that energy. In very rare cases, you can have what's called a parasympathetic rebound. So essentially, the parasympathetic nervous system kind of goes overboard and it calms you down a whole lot. It suppresses your body a great deal. It can be severe enough that will cause a person to die after some hyper emotional event. Think of like, a broken heart, people, old people who die right after their spouse dies. They're so stressed, and then that stress kind of calms down so much that they then themselves pass away. But again, that's very rare. Generally, our body is very good at balancing that sympathetic with parasympathetic branch and allowing your body to return to homeostasis. Again, here's like a little quick chart that kind of goes through the two branches. On the left, you have our sympathetic branch. So in times of stress, your pupils dilate, it relaxes your bronchi, allows you to open up your lungs and breathe and get more oxygen, accelerates your heartbeat, stops your digestive system, and constricts your blood vessels. But then when you relax and that parasympathetic branch kicks in, your pupils contract, they go back to normal, it will reconstrict your bronchi, slow your heartbeat, stimulate your digestion, and dilate your blood vessels. When we look at emotions, we're pretty good at looking at people and very quickly judging other people's emotions. So if we go through here, I want you to kind of look at this emotion, this face, and kind of say what you think her emotion is. So this one you're probably seeing as happiness. What about this one? This one's anger. This is surprise. This is disgust. This guy has a sad face, and then this is fearful. And if we look at smiles, how we interpret smiles is actually something that we do very quickly, even though there are subtle differences. So if you look at these two faces, the two smiles of this gentleman here, the left or the right, which one do you think is real and which one do you think is fake? Most of you guys are probably correct in guessing that this is the real smile. This is what's known in the field as a Duchenne or a genuine smile, and this is a fake smile. The way you can tell the difference is not just the fact that his teeth are showing more here, but here you get a lot more eye engagement, and the muscles around your eyes when you smile, I think they're the zygoorbital muscles, they become engaged, and you get a lot more of like your cheeks kind of raising up, and then you see these eye muscles engaged more. And that's how you can tell if it's a genuine smile versus someone who's smiling essentially just to put on a front. Like I mentioned, we're going to talk quickly about lie detector tests. So polygraphs are a device that are used for recording one's heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, and what's called galvanic skin response. That's essentially the level of perspiration that then helps an electrical current pass through the skin. You've probably seen polygraph tests on TV shows, crime documentaries, even like silly daytime TV shows. They hook a person up to a polygraph, and then they ask them a series of questions. They will ask them really basic yes or no questions, So is your name this? And then they have to say yes or no. Do you live at this address? Yes or no? And they want to see what their body's response is to these basic questions that they can easily divine the truth from. And then they ask them more serious questions, and they do it in what's called like a guilty knowledge test. So they'll ask them questions that only people who know the real answer, a person would be guilty, wouldn't be able to correctly say yes or no to. And it's not really so much as whether they say yes or no to the answer. It's essentially their body's response to trying to cover up what they know. So you'll see a spike in blood pressure or a spike in their galvanic skin response relating to essentially them covering up a knowledge that they might have. The problem with polygraph tests is that they're not super reliable. Honest people can easily fail, which is called a false positive, and guilty people can pass the test, which is a myth. There's actually people out there who train other people on how to pass polygraph tests, or people who have been known to be just so nervous in the situation that they will incorrectly, their body will incorrectly like show stress and fear when they're perfectly innocent. There's a really interesting podcast about this on Canvas, where a gentleman, he used to be the trainer for police officers and police stations to how to use polygraph tests, and then he realized how falsifiable they were. So then he goes around now and he gets paid by people who have to take a polygraph test on how to fake it. It's really a crazy story. You should check that out. It's really interesting. So how does gender and emotion relate? Women in Western society are said to be more emotional, and this is overall true in our Western society. What happens is generally women are socialized into being more emotional and society is more accepting of women and their emotionality. Men can have what's called alexithymia. So that's a learned difficulty in expressing emotions. This is much more common in men than women. This is often a result of boys being told to toughen up, and then at the same time, girls are being encouraged to discuss their emotions. Because men are being told not to express emotions, they become less aware of them. And oftentimes in our society, the only emotions that men are allowed to express is anger, the only negative emotion. Fear is discouraged and sadness is discouraged, telling boys that they gotta man up, or to, boys don't cry. So really the only emotion that they can show as a negative emotion is anger. So instead of, showing their sadness or their fear, they just come out with anger. And this is where you get a lot of toxic masculinity type behaviors kind of coming out. Is men and young boys being taught, not to express, their true range of emotions the same way that women are. Within the study of emotion is the study of body language, which is called kinesthetics or kinesics. And so that's a study of the meaning of bodily movements, posture, hand gestures, facial expressions. Overall, it's our body language. So we can say one thing and our body can express something completely different. When we're, speaking with sarcasm, we may give a little hint of our facial expression or our body posture that lets a person know that what we're saying isn't what we truly mean. We can be saying something really nasty to a friend, but we're giving away in our, our body language what we actually mean, or in our interest of other people. If you're in a conversation with a group of people, kind of notice which way their feet are pointing. If a person doesn't want to be part of the conversation, typically will kind of move their shoulder a little bit to the side, or they'll point their feet away. And that's an indication that they no longer want to be part of that conversation. But people who are interested will point their feet in the direction of the people that they're interested in speaking to. You can kind of use this to your advantage in understanding this idea of what's called behavioral mimicry. This is subconsciously imitating the postures, mannerisms, and facial expressions of people we interact with. Now, we generally do this naturally, where if we're really vibing with someone and they shift their body position subtly, we just automatically mimic them. We do kind of the same thing. We subtly shift our body position to look like theirs. But you can use this to your advantage, whether you're on a date or maybe if you are... Sorry, my dog is about to fall off the couch. There you go. if you're in a job interview. So if you're sitting across the table from let's say a cute guy, and you're sitting there and he kind of shifts his body weight kind of to the side and kind of leans over, if you kind of do the same thing a few seconds later, he won't necessarily recognize you're mimicking him, but it's almost like a subconscious understanding of like, oh, this person's in sync with me. And you can do this, you can kind of do this intentionally. So maybe lean back in your chair and see if that person responds in kind, and then you'll know that you guys are vibing. You can also do this with job interviews and subtly mimic the body position and expressions of the person that you're interviewing with, and they're gonna subconsciously be like, wow, like I really got along well with that person. So little fun trick in your playbook to use in the future. And then we also have this really interesting idea of what's called the facial feedback hypothesis. This hypothesis states that sensations from facial expressions help define the emotion that the person feels. So generally we think of emotions as like, we see something happen in the world. So you're in the hallway and you see someone trip and fall flat on their face, and you're like, oh man, something funny just happened. Your brain registers that as that's funny, and then you have a facial expression of like smiling and laughter. But in this hypothesis, this says that this can go the other direction. So you can give yourself a big fake smile, make sure you get those eye muscles engaged, and it tricks your brain into thinking, oh, something funny or something happy must be happening if she's making that expression. And therefore, your brain like releases like happy chemicals, like, oh, hey, I'm feeling happy now. And it can trick your body into having the physiological changes relating to happiness. So there's a couple of different research studies on this where they have people hold chopsticks in their mouth, either having them hold the chopsticks straight out like a straw, and then they would have them rate cartoons of how funny they were, or they had them with a neutral expression, nothing in their mouth, and then another one where they had the chopstick going horizontally across their mouth, held in their teeth with their lips pulled back and like this weird like grimacy smile. And they showed that when people had the big goofy grin, they rated the cartoons as being funnier. There's also another study that had people going through a stressful activity. They would have them put their hand in a bucket of ice water and then do this complicated physical task. And then the ones that were having to force this fake smile, they actually had a lower physiological reaction. So their heart rate was lower after the stressful period. So it's kind of interesting. It kind of goes to the saying, you know, people say like, oh, smile, it'll help you get through it. Just grin and bear it and it'll make it better. So if you're in a bad mood, you could try smiling. It might help. Some of this research has come in under question more recently, but it is an interesting idea, and it doesn't hurt to maybe force a fake smile here and there. Then that comes into the idea of like people who've had Botox or who have facial paralysis. Are they feeling emotions as strongly as the rest of us if their facial expression can't actually show what they're feeling? Maybe their brain isn't getting the same feedback response that the rest of us do. So I think it's an interesting thing to think about and to try out the next time you're in a bad mood. So how to be happier. There's a lot of research into this idea that will relate to our assignment throughout this chapter on happiness. So first of all, it's important to try to identify one positive event each day. So take a moment and think about something good that happened to you, whether it was, you know, you had a good breakfast, a friend gave you a hug, you did well in a test. Like, try to focus on that positive event each day. Tell someone about that positive event or share it on social media. It may seem a little like self-aggrandizing, but it will help you savor that moment a little bit longer. And so maybe post on your Snapchat story like, hey, like, you know, so-and-so gave me a great high five today, or I'm just so happy, like, did you guys see that sunrise? It was beautiful. So those little positive things, and sharing that with someone else kind of helps you feel it a little bit more. Start a daily gratitude journal. So aim to find little things that you're grateful for, such as a good cup of coffee, a pretty sunrise, nice weather. Having a good lesson in class, you know, just a funny joke maybe a friend told. And then identify a personal strength and then reflect on how you've used that strength today or in recent weeks. So like you're a good peer editor and you helped a friend edit their paper so that they did better, or you were there to support a friend when they were going through a stressful time. And then set a daily goal and track your progress. So it could be a small goal. Hey, I just want to eat, one more piece of fruit per day. And, keep progress or keep track of your progress, and then try to see how that goal may shift or how you make progress towards that goal. You can also try positive reappraisal. So identify an event or an activity that's a hassle, and then try to reframe that event into a more positive light. So if you're stuck in traffic or you're having to ride the bus, try to savor that quiet time. And if you practice it enough, it starts to become a habit. Or, I know for me, like, commuting to and from school can kind of be a bit of a bummer, and it feels like a time waste. But for me, I listen to podcasts that I really enjoy. You might listen to music that you really enjoy, and then you utilize that time for something positive, and then you look forward to it. Like, I now look forward to my drive home. It may take, half an hour, 45 minutes some days if traffic is bad, but then I'm like, oh, just more time to listen to this. Or put on a song from like one of your favorite artists. It'll make you in a much better mood. Another thing you can do is try to do something nice for someone else each day. These small acts of kindness can be something as simple as giving someone a smile, giving up your seat on a crowded train, hold the door for someone. When you go refill your water bottle in class, ask your friend if they need any more water. And then research shows that we feel better when we're kind to others. We can also practice mindfulness. We talked about this back in chapter 5. And pay attention to the present moment. You could do a 10-minute breathing exercise. Use that Calm app that I showed you guys. There's great ones on YouTube. Taking a few minutes, even in the morning, just to do some stretches for your body. Or before you go to bed, do some stretches or some progressive muscle relaxation. And that will really help you calm your mind and make you feel better overall. And this list actually comes from an NPR article. These are all research-based. I hope you check it out. And then there's a bunch of other resources on Canvas under modules for a bunch of different happiness practices that I would suggest you guys take a look at if that's something that you want to work on. All right, that is the end of chapter 10. Thank you so much, guys, and I will see you soon.